Well, hello. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? We're here on a beautiful Friday morning. Got a little extra dusting of snow last night, as we have been getting every night here in the gorgeous Midwest region of the US of A. Excuse me just a moment while I... Sorry about that. Had a big, gross bunch of phlegmy phlegm. I'm sure that's something you guys want to hear about, so I got you. No worries. At any rate, got this painting over. I think I showed this off in my last stream, but I didn't really go into... I didn't do any work on it. And I'm not sure that I actually want to. I know I put this as the thumbnail of the video, but we might get to this a little bit later. There are some slightly more complicated elements of this piece that I'm not exactly sure how to tackle just yet. Namely, like handling, this painting has like a very strong single light source. There's kind of the moon in the background, but just figuring out how I'm gonna weave in the colors and everything. I think there needs to be some more unification of the color palette with this particular painting. And then we've got the Demonic Tutor over here, which I have been working on stream, and I think we will continue to do so. Just because I feel like kind of noodling on this guy. So let's go ahead and pull up the brush we want to use. I've been using the oil paint flat brush, like almost entirely. I played around with a couple other brushes, and I think I will want to use something a little more wispy, a little less chunky on the figures in blue down here, just because I want them to appear a little more ethereal, you know what I mean? So anyway, let's get into it. I think I'm gonna start by... Yeah, let's just start on these little, these blue dudes down here. So I need to kind of define what's going on with their hands and such a little bit more. And figure out the lighting there. Anyway, what I really have enjoyed about this is just the really direct nature of this process. So a lot of times what I used to do, what I still do for, just depending on the nature of the piece and what I'm trying to go for, especially like fan art, I do like a line art, kind of a digital line art thing. Why do I say thing? What I mean by that is obviously there's the sketch part of it, which is mostly lines, and like a sort of pencil brush, and then I kind of like ink over it. It's not really... it is really inking. It's essentially the same process as if you were inking, a traditional piece. But you get the lines, then you fill it in with like flat colors, and you have a bunch of layers that you're working with just to kind of keep things organized. And it can be a real hassle, to be honest. And I really like just being able to go directly over things here. It is like, I'm finding it's like there are elements of it that are more and less time consuming, you know what I mean? So, for example, like I could just sort of like noodle on this forever, and because I don't really exactly know what I'm doing, there is this, potential risk of just destroying the good stuff and the work that you have been doing, just because you're kind of like going over it. And I actually have some videos that I did of attempting to do this on a piece where I kind of like I tried to paint it like multiple times using this method, and then I just gave up and went back to my old method. But then I went back over it with this sort of painting approach to sort of render it up after I did the flats and the multiply layer with the shadows and all of that stuff, if you're familiar with that. And I think there is like room for that. There is room for using a process like that, that's sort of like you basically give yourself like a basis that has like all the main sort of like colors and values and a really much tighter set of like line work outlines to kind of use, and then from there basically taking that and going over it as I'm doing now. That is definitely an option, and what that does for you is it gives you a little bit more solidity, a little bit more like if you have some kind of like under sketch or something, it allows you to kind of like fall back on that and really allow that to guide some of your bigger decisions with where you're putting your strokes. And just having that basis makes it, you're not inventing it from whole cloth on the spot, which I think is probably the most daunting part of painting, is like not having a plan. And daunting doesn't mean that's wrong. I think you can go in without a plan per se and still produce something very good and discover those surprises. It really just depends on what your goals are for your piece, right? Like this one, there's definitely some happy accident type things going on here. I didn't initially plan for these guys to be blue. But I think I mentioned on the last stream, I kind of like the idea of them being sort of like astral projecting themselves into this demon's like little seminar thing here. So another thing I'm having fun with, or that I want to accentuate more, is like I'm realizing with this guy back here, like the backs of people's heads and necks, and like especially like older bald heads, like they do have kind of they have some weird shapes. They're like, sometimes they appear more fleshy than you would expect for something as solid as a head with a skull underneath it and whatnot. So with this guy, we'll kind of accentuate some of that. You look at any human being long enough and they start to look like some kind of demon creature, because I think the bodies are just crazy. There's all kinds of crazy little nooks and crannies and fleshy bits, and it's fun to mess around with that. I think most artists who are appreciators of the human form, if that's their focus, find that bodies are pretty strange and beautiful and ugly, and like beautiful because they're ugly, and ugly because they're beautiful. It sounds like nonsense, but I feel like people will sort of like get what I mean. It is kind of nonsense. It's like literally it doesn't make sense, and I think that's another great thing about art. It doesn't have to make sense. I think art is sort of about, the irony is like it's about sense making, but sometimes that means you have to like allow a piece to utterly confuse you. Oh man, that's some pretentious stuff. We love it. We love pretentious stuff. Now, depending on what kind of pretentious it is, I think there are a lot of art critics, art historians, art philosophizers who will look at like fantasy art or stuff like this, or illustration, just sort of generally, and sort of claim that it's not actually art, because it like it's just like kind of raw representation, of a. I actually don't know what their arguments are, to be honest. I just know that a thing that is said, or it's like if it's not breaking new ground or say delivering some kind of spiritual or political message or something, that it's not really art, and obviously I think that's silly. I think there are things to be discovered in basically all types of subject matter. I really don't know that there's like a form of representation like drawing or painting that someone could engage in that wouldn't be considered art. I guess like the maybe the only defensible example of that is like a pure like study that somebody is doing. Like they're literally just trying to like figure out an anatomy problem, or they're painting a still life like purely to enhance their technical skills. But then like it's like once that thing is created, once it is an artifact, it communicates something to other people, and as it does that, it becomes art. So it's like sort of like in practice, maybe it doesn't feel like art, or it might not be defined as art by the person doing it, but once it's out in the world, it's sort of like not your call anymore, in a sense. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why, for example, I think it's, for example, like satire is often, mistaken for the real thing, like an actual legitimate political message promoting something bad. Good example of this is like Starship Troopers, which I think is pretty obviously satire, but like Roger Ebert didn't think so. He thought it was like seriously like a jingoistic sort of thing, which to be fair, the book that movie is based on is actually a pro-war, like authoritarian, kind of screed. Kind of getting off topic, but the point is, like, once a piece of art is out there, and it's funny with that example because it's like the director Paul Verhoeven is essentially taking something that is like a fascist piece of literature and making fun of it, turning it into a satire and using it, but still using its name. And it's a good example of something where it's like, yeah, once the thing is out there, it's like you don't know what people are going to do with that message, and people will misinterpret it, and people will take it and make it their own. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. I think in any case, it's a thing that will happen. Essentially, it's sort of a net neutral thing. It's like people need to be able to interact with the art that they discover, and that's sort of part of what makes it art. I think is that interactive quality. Back anatomy, famously difficult. I literally have no idea what I'm doing over here. And not no idea, but like very little idea. And so I think I want to leave the specifics a little bit muddy. I need a little more blue in here. This is leaning a little bit green. And again, I think I mentioned, like, I'm trying to decide, like, to what extent I want these guys to sort of be reflecting or picking up or exemplifying like the lighting of the wider scenario that they're in. So it's like you want a piece to be unified, and for the lighting scheme to make sense. But then you have something like this where it's like, well, normally figures aren't like lit internally from some kind of ethereal force. So you have to kind of figure out what that means for how you want to approach that problem. And the way I'm approaching it is by noodling on it and seeing if I like the result. This piece is sort of experimental in a way. it's kind of figuring out how I best want to approach this process. It's also why I'm like zooming in and out a lot, because I want to sort of see like what my strokes are doing to the wider picture and the information that's being created with that. If you're curious, this is, again, I usually listen to Diablo music while I'm streaming. And this is like the Diablo lo-fi beats mix, which I think is fun that they did that with Diablo. Again, I think the music is the best thing to come out of Diablo. I mean, it's a good game. Diablo 1 and 2 anyway. I'm not a huge fan of Diablo 3. But I have a lot of nostalgia for Diablo 2. Diablo 2 especially. Diablo 1 as well. I know I've told this anecdote on stream before, but like me and my buddy Kyle used to call each other on our like houses like landlines, and separately play Diablo 1 like single player. Because I was like playing it like on this ancient Mac that I didn't have internet on it or anything. I could play like Diablo 1 and StarCraft 1, but like really slowly. And I didn't have like a right click on it because it was a Mac. So funny stuff, goofy shenanigans. And I think, a fun approach to painting is sort of just like going in and pecking everything to death with like sort of like a stippling approach, but just, because you get all these fun like kind of splotchy effects. And then it allows you to sort of like quickly, well, not quickly, depending on how you do it, but get a broad swath of colors and values in the general areas that you want, and then going back through and sort of figuring out the details. So I hope if you, for those that end up watching this, coming along live, that you're drawing while you watch, you're doing something else creative, or if you just want to play video games, that's cool too. Get a little inspiration or just have some fun. Not everything that you do needs to be oriented towards your output or productivity. Don't want to give that impression. This guy is becoming way more jacked though than I had intended. Like this arm is kind of like, yeah, that arm doesn't make sense. We're gonna, I think, yeah. What if we just blotted this out? And we just did a lot of work there, but like I sort of want to. I want to fix this guy a little bit. Make his arm a little skinnier, give his gut a little more of a pronounced, sort of like jutting out here. And just figure out some of these shapes a little bit. This is another nice thing about digital, of course, is you can sort of just carve your shapes out like so. And that's pretty fun. And hassle-free. Just gotta know when you've sort of like hit on it, hit what you're trying to go for. I don't really have parameters for what these guys are supposed to be or be doing. Aside from that they're attending this like class, so to speak. But I don't want them to be like jacked. That's not really the point of these guys. Thing is, I like drawing big muscular arms, so which is why it appears that way. It's okay on the demon because he's like got superpowers, supernatural abilities, but these guys are just, you know, well, they also have supernatural abilities, I'm guessing. They're astral projecting themselves into this realm to take a seminar, so must have something going on. Let's get a sip of coffee here. Just kind of going in and defining this a little bit further. And again, it's like the other thing is because I have ideas for what I want the final purpose of this piece to be, which is as a magic card proxy for demonic tutor. Like I said, this is over here is incorrect. Just blot this a little bit and I'm gonna blot this whole like back area out and sort of re-establish the values here. But again, not all of these guys are going to be in focus. Some of them might not even be in frame. I still want this to function as a piece unto itself, but I also, you know, for time's sake, it's like I need to consider, because I need to have these, I want to have these printed by no later than, these need to be in my hands no later than March. Which, you know, sounds like, oh, it's like, sounds like plenty of time, but if you're going to place an order for something like this, for those of you who are thinking about printing or thinking about, you know, product design or development, it's like, you want to get some stock of this, because if you order too few, you're paying too high a unit price, and if you order too many of a single one, you know, you might not be efficient inventory wise. So I need to get a couple of these done in order to make this a worthwhile endeavor in time for March. That's the goal. That's the purpose. Those are the deadlines that we got to meet if we want this project to be a financial success and not just you know, an artistic success. That's the idea anyway. So fairly splotchy. I don't know if I loved what I did, but I also didn't love how it looked before. I think from a distance it's okay, but I don't want to rely on that to give the piece all of its pizzazz. So I think we're going to leave that where it is for now, and we're going to return to the demon. Return to the demon himself in his cool chair. For those wondering, I do have these set up on different layers to some extent. The demon and the chair are the same layer. The book is a separate layer just to make it easier. With these, the brush that I'm using in particular, it has a tendency to smudge things, so I want to avoid that if at all possible. And then here, of course, you can still see the sort of like underpainting. And I think we will shave off a little bit of the exterior on some of these. He's a little big. Yeah, again, like, don't be afraid to make hands look too chunky, especially when you're working digital, because you can always trim them down to a more appropriate size and shape. And you know, it's probably more time efficient to just to get them blocked in first and worry about the specifics a little bit later. This is the case with like many artistic problems, is like get the block in, get the big ideas on the page, and the rest will kind of fall into place. Well, it won't fall into place, you'll have to work for it, but that is what will allow things to more easily fall into place, I should say, than if you had just, you know, gone in guns ablazing with your little pea shooter and tried to poke holes in. I don't know where this analogy is going, but you know, essentially, it's like, don't go in trying to put the veins on the hands and the, you know, figure out all the knuckles and the wrinkles and all that stuff. Do that later. If you're really feeling like noodling, like, do it on a separate thing, and then, you know, figure out how do you want to apply that to your piece once you've established the big picture and figured that out. This is not advice that I always follow myself, but it's probably the best advice out there. It yields the best results, generally speaking. And when I don't follow it, I suffer. And you don't want to suffer. Suffering stinks. It's bad. It's the definition of bad. It's like the number one thing everybody tries to avoid in their life. And when you're just doing something for fun, especially, like art often is, you want to avoid that at all costs, unless you get off on it, you know, like what do you call them? Masochist. In which case, yeah, it's like you're suffering in like one dimension of your personage. It's like you're suffering maybe physically or something. You're having a struggle of some kind, a mental struggle that creates suffering, but then makes you feel good in some other dimension of yourself, like psychologically or something. I don't know why I'm philosophizing about this, but it's probably just because I have nothing else to say. I don't know what I'm doing. This is all off the cuff. I really do like this area. I like the abstract shapes that are going on there in the sort of like value distribution of it. We take that, we rock and roll with that. Again, I want, like, figure out how I can unify this in a way that makes, you know, visual and story sense. And so I'm trying to, I want to make sure that the flesh of him looks distinct from the tree, but I also want them to have similar elements. Like I like this little like weird like knot that's like forming in his like shoulder region, because it sort of mimics like what's going on with the tree in the background. And sometimes, you know, doing a piece, especially a larger piece or a more involved piece, is all about like generating those little fun little tidbits here and there that you just kind of enjoy and appreciate just as they are. Little tidbits. Tidbits, artistic tidbits. That's where the good stuff is. But also sometimes the good stuff is looking at just like a very well composed, unified thing. And then finding like the little snacks distributed throughout that are both things unto themselves and also, like, if done well, help to unify the piece in addition to the sort of overall value distribution, for example. So what's an example of that? Little veins here on his arm, like we want these to make sense given the lighting scheme that that we're applying, whatever that may be. So as long as they sort of like follow the rules, once you add these in, they actually give, you know, it will give the viewer naturally like an impression of the reality of the piece, right? Though it's like visual information that clarifies everything else that's going on. It clarifies the big picture, even though it is like a small little detail. That makes sense. Kind of like what I'm doing over here. Like this is sort of like jutting out. This fleshy bit that's jutting out is sort of jutting in here, so you know that like this is a big massive shadow, but you see this little contrast here where there's clearly this like flesh bit like kind of hanging off or like extending up into that. And so, you know, that's just a little example, a little teeny weeny kind of thingamabobber that to illustrate my point. And as artists, especially artists, you know, like me, who want to, you know, eventually make more of my living off of like talking about art and in this fashion, you know, streaming about it and whatnot. Being able to illustrate a point is sort of the whole point. If you can't illustrate your point, then why are you you know, making art in video form? You have to be able to make points and then show what you need, show your work, in a sense. One thing I do need to enhance a little is this ear, because it's likely that this guy's face will be one of the primary things that appears in the card, obviously. So I want to define his ear a little bit more, just so that it's clear that it's like distinct from these elements of his neck. So one of the greatest challenges in painting that most painters will discover, and I am certainly in the throes of now, is defining your edges. very difficult to do, especially when digitally painting. It's very easy to fall into traps of losing edge definition, especially when you're smudging or blending things. Sometimes it's a difficult call to make, like when do I want, and then if like you add in these hard lines, it kind of loses that painterly feel. So it's a balance, it's a dance that you have to do with your piece. Gotta be able to dance if you're an artist. Gotta be a good dancer. I mean, not literally. Most artists are, probably terrible dancers because we spend a lot of time alone, working with our hands and not with our feet. I'm not a particularly good dancer. I will dance. I think just about everybody can dance, as long as you have any mobility at all. You can move as long as you can move to rhythm. It doesn't matter if you're moving with the rhythm, but if you're able to move in response to rhythm, you can dance. And even if that rhythm is just in your head, right? You can dance. You don't have to be able to hear the rhythm. You can feel the rhythm. You can tap it out. This is not relevant to painting, per se, in a literal sense, but I don't know, maybe it's relevant somehow. Ooh. I really am enjoying this. This is fun. This is, I don't know if it's a good painting, but it's certainly a thing that I would call painting. I don't have any qualms about calling digital work like the thing that it is mimicking, depending on the process, of course. Like I wouldn't call an AI painting a painting. It's an image, for example. It's like nobody actually like put down strokes or thought about like how it was to be arranged. It wasn't produced in a similar fashion to how a painter works. Whereas this, essentially, like it's like not having paint and like an actual brush or an actual canvas. It's really the only thing that prevents us from being like termed a painting, because the way that the image is rendered is more similar to painting, for example, than it is to drawing. Granted, it's all drawing, it's just drawing with paint, drawing with light. The song is a banger, by the way. Gosh darn. Alright, since I did put in the thumbnail of this stream the vampire painting, we might have to switch over to that at some point, just so I don't appear to be a liar of some type. Also, on the last stream, I totally redid the horns that I did in the last stream, and I'm glad I did. I've realized that it is difficult to do like really heavy design work for me while like talking about it on stream. And I was just like, I like the ideas that I had going with the horns, where the horns were like sort of mimicking they were more antler-like, but eventually it just didn't feel like a demon. It didn't feel like demon horns. And because this is meant to be a magic proxy, where this is like a black magic card, a black magic demon, I felt like he needed to have horns that sort of matched up with that a little more. That said, I don't love this design either, and the issue I'm seeing with it, I think, is that it makes him and the tree too even in height and stature. I think the tree needs to be a little bit bigger and taller than he is. So I think I need to shrink the horns a little bit in some fashion. And why don't we go ahead, since I'm talking about it, and do that now. I'm just going to cut these off. I almost don't just, I don't hate that if this were to get a little bit skinnier. Just make it a little skinnier. And maybe even, let me chop these off for a moment. We can add them back in if we feel like it's necessary. Maybe it's just simple like this, and the detail comes in the rendering. You know, I don't hate that, actually. I like the simplicity of it. I like the color of it. We're gonna do like sort of like a purple, to indicate the sort of like the texturing of the horns. Not texturing even, like just the flow of them. Purple goes with the yellow. Again, I have like a third grade understanding of color theory, so that's it's not a problem I plan to rectify intentionally. So if this is bothering you, prepare to be bothered for the next 10 years probably. Because I'm not going to go out of my way to learn color theory. Maybe I will. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that I would prefer to sort of like handle intuitively than to study. Because color is one of those things that weird combinations can often be the most satisfying. And if you just follow the rules, you might not get to those things. Actually, which is funny I'm saying that because I am sort of like following the rules, as it were. And I'm only breaking the rules when I don't know what I'm doing, which is not an intelligent way to approach breaking the rules. That makes sense. You know, they say, it's like one mantra you hear, and I don't think there's actually necessarily a ton of credence to this, but it's like, oh, if you want to break the rules, you got to learn the fundamentals first in art. And when people are talking about that, they're usually talking about like Picasso or something. Which, like, Picasso was a good artist, but he wasn't like... And I'm talking specifically about his work that he did before he became Picasso, you know? Like his stuff is sound, but art teachers will say, oh, you have to learn these fundamentals before you can break the rules or whatever, and it's like, no, you don't. You don't actually have to. There's no like law that says you have to. Maybe it's a good idea for what you want to do, maybe it's not. Ultimately, I don't think it matters. I don't think you need to learn all the rules to break the rules. I don't think you need to know how to apply the rules. I think maybe there is an argument to be made for like, you should sort of like understand theoretically like why you're doing what you're doing with any image that you make. But I don't know. Who cares? Who cares? This is all for fun. Even the stuff that's like client work is sort of it might not be your fun, but it's somebody's fun. Somebody is having fun with it. I don't know. That's not always true. Sometimes it's just like corporate bullshit. You have to design a flyer or something, and even the person like putting on the event like doesn't give a single shit about it. And that's just, a fact of life under capitalism is sometimes money is spent on things that nobody cares about. And like if they didn't happen, nothing would change about the world. And we're going to spend that money anyway, even though there are people like starving and dying of preventable diseases and stuff like that. A little dark, a little heavy. That's okay. We are drawing demons here. So the darker side of things is bound to come out. It's funny because this is like, you know, objectively speaking, one of the most lighthearted topics I could be painting about. It's just like it is hell. It's a place that it's a place that doesn't exist. If you want hell, if you want to actually visit hell, you can visit any number of war zones or, you know, occupied territories around the world, and you can find like the worst stuff that's like ever happened to anybody is happening like right now. And you can go out and find those places. Yeah, you'll realize that like anybody's like fictional version of Satan couldn't have like come up with like the real awful shit that people do to each other on this planet. That got kind of dark, but again, I'm trying to make the point that this is not dark. This is for fun. This is cool and fun. And if your mom doesn't like it, well, you know, she can go and, I don't know, vote for Reagan again or something, you know, if she wants to make the world a better place. Vote for Trump again. I don't want to get political with these streams, but the point is, people that do vanilla stuff in their day-to-day lives will be accidentally doing like a worse moral crime than any artist will be painting like depraved nonsense. That's my point. It's like people are accidentally aiding and abetting war crimes, for example, in their day-to-day lives by like, you know, supporting like the morons that we have in Washington. And so your art practice, you know, within some reasonable limits of, you know, depicting like really disturbing stuff, will always be more ethical and contribute more joy and humanity to the world, almost no matter what you're painting, again, within reason, than just about anybody else in your life. And that's an incredibly arrogant thing to say, but it's also true. If you're an artist, you're a hero. You're a... yeah, I mean, I'm joking, of course. Yeah. But you're at least not a villain. It's really funny, like, you know, I love D&D, and just thinking about, like, the Satanic Panic, or like the you know, when Harry Potter was first becoming big, and there were people who were like against Harry Potter because it was about witchcraft, and there was some, I don't know, assumption that it was converting children into, you know, witches or something. I do think the cult around Harry Potter is a little bit unfortunate, shall we say. I think the bulk of those problems just come from people being like too into their fandoms to an unhealthy degree, and that's bad. Not because it's Harry Potter, it's bad, or, you know, not because it's wizards and witches. It's just bad because those people could be living richer and more fulfilling lives if they just, I don't know, read a different book or like watched better movies. Or like stopped talking about Harry Potter all the time, or Marvel or Star Wars or whatever. If they would just, you know, branch out a little, go and see the world. You'll find all kinds of cool stuff out there, all kinds of great art that doesn't have anything to do with whatever fandom you happen to be into, and that's great. It's good to discover new things. It's a thing I don't do often enough, to be honest. I'm saying this, and in my daily life, the bulk of the reading that I do is like rereading Lord of the Rings. I think Lord of the Rings is a far superior book to any of the Harry Potter books, or those that set of books. Not for any specific reason besides the fact that I just enjoy reading them now as an adult more than I do enjoy reading Harry Potter. I was a Harry Potter fan. I still am to some extent. I think the books are enjoyable, but they almost feel like they're soap opera-y in a way that I sort of didn't understand why they were appealing in that sense. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is entertaining not because it's like a high fantasy setting, but because it's a soap opera with, set in a medieval setting. Game of Thrones is a soap, and it ended like a soap. Yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it. I was never offended by the ending of Game of Thrones because I watched it years later. I'd already heard it was terrible. And I was just waiting for the books. I was waiting for those books, the final book or books, or however many it was going to be. And George R.R. Martin never delivered, and you know what? That's his prerogative. He's the artist, he's the creator. If he doesn't want to finish his story, then more power to him. It's nobody's business but his own. We're not entitled to the end of any story or piece of art. You get what you pay for, and sort of collectively as a society through our viewing and fawning over the TV series, we paid for the TV ending, and that will forever be the canon ending of Game of Thrones because George R.R. Martin is not going to write the rest of it. He's done. He's working on Elden Ring 2 or whatever the hell he's doing. I don't know what George R.R. Martin is doing with his time, but yeah, it's funny they had him write the lore for Elden Ring, and I was like, this is like not real. It's cool and whatever that they got him, but I don't know that it really matters. I feel like FromSoft had always been like pretty good at putting together esoteric, weird lore, like atmospheric storytelling. And George R.R. Martin is better at writing soap operas, which Elden Ring is not a soap opera. Unfortunately, they could make it a soap opera. I don't know. I could do that. Is there going to be an Elden Ring show? I don't think there is. What's coming out? There's going to be a Harry Potter thing. Speaking of Harry Potter, I think. I don't actually know. I don't remember if that's a legitimate thing. There's going to be Fallout show. I have a feeling that won't nearly be weird enough to be enjoyable. I don't really get the point of, like, I can see why The Last of Us maybe was turned into a show, because it was basically set up to be like a story, whereas Fallout is a game that's fun. It's a game series that's fun because of the interactivity. Like, the stories are not, it's like the little individual stories that are fun. And I don't think people are really, I don't think studios would spend money producing like episodic content for a massive IP like Fallout. They'd want something big and bombastic and something with staying power. They want Game of Thrones. They want the next Game of Thrones. And regardless of whether the IP suits that, they will make it. Kind of like they did with Rings of Power. Lord of the Rings, not particularly well set up for a Game of Thrones-like thing. Even something where it's like, oh, there's a surprise coming. Which is why they really botched that in Rings of Power, turning it into this episodic, like, who's who, what's going on, how's the ring gonna be, whatever, you know? Like, I don't think that people found that appealing because it's sort of like, this is a story where we already know the ending. We know the good guys win, and the more interesting part is how they get there and how they react to the challenges that they face. And so if you don't care about that, then Lord of the Rings doesn't work as a story. If you don't care about the journey, and you only care about finding out what happens at the end, Lord of the Rings does not work. It would be an incredibly boring story. For example, there's like a lot of stuff in like Fellowship of the Ring, like the book, that's just like talking about the Fellowship like figuring out how to ford a river and like trudging through crappy terrain and sort of like being on the lookout for orcs on the eastern shore or whatever that never materialize, or they sort of like poke their heads out and they see them, but there's no skirmish or anything that happens. And that stuff is entertaining and thrilling to read if you care about the characters and, you know, the struggles that they're facing. Like how, you know, if you come to appreciate how difficult all this stuff is, all of the, even the mundane stuff, it's like, if you come to understand like the challenge that is not like the heroic challenge, but the sort of everyday challenge that they're facing, the thing that anybody on a quest like this would have to go through. If you care about that, then it's an entertaining story to read. And if you don't, it's not. And just the tone of Lord of the Rings just doesn't lend itself well to more of a Game of Thrones-y sort of like, ooh, who's going to kill who, what's going to happen, you know. We know who's going to kill who. At the end of the Rings of Power, they're going to chop Sauron's finger off because that's what happened at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. We already know that. We don't need to rehash any of that. And the only reason you would rehash it is if there was an interesting story to tell. And maybe there is, but it seemed like the producers of Rings of Power were more concerned with creating a scenario where people would watch it week to week rather than crafting, you know, enjoyable and interesting characters to watch do stuff. Seems like that was more their speed, unfortunately. Let's get in real close on this fingernail here. I'm gonna have to do some work on these fingernails. We gotta give his other hand a bunch of fingernails as well, of course. See if I grab this color, that does change it. Okay. I'll have to add some highlights to these little fingernails that he's got. I say though, there is something like kind of satisfying about a nice squared fingernail on like a well-designed end of a finger. It's like the thing that artists care about and nobody else. people like appreciate, but they maybe don't know why they appreciate it. Just because it looks realistic or it looks nice. But I have to give him these like long, nasty fingernails. So. Pointy fingernails. Also, yeah. The background. I'm avoiding the background. I am doing that because I don't know exactly what I want to do with it. That's okay, though. I don't have to know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I just have to generally sort of generally know. And that's okay. All right, let's see. How long have we been going here? One thing about my stream software is it doesn't actually have the time that I've been going. Okay, cool. All right. Going for about an hour. That is good. Generally, I've been doing these for about an hour. I could probably go a little longer today, though. So we will go a little bit longer. And I think I'm going to get rid of these yellow highlights for now. Just so I can concentrate on the overall shape of this without those distracting me. And maybe even change the shape of what's going on over here a little bit, or shrink that, and let's see, let's play around with this and see what we can do here. The idea of like every time you do something like that where you cut a piece off and you put it back in, you're sort of like stitching together this creature again. Okay, let me see here. So I think this guy's just a little screwed up here. Again, you always be mindful of the risk that you're muddying these edges a little bit too much. And I need to, there's like this space here that's really bugging me, so I need to go into the background here and fix that. Some blue maybe. Again, don't know fully what I'm doing with the background. But that's going to bother me less. Now that there's not just that under sketch bit showing, you know? Okay. Sometimes you just got to sit back, and that's one thing that I don't do as much while I'm streaming because I'm kind of focusing on blabbering, but sometimes you just got to sit back and look at the piece. I'm actually going to look at it in this other monitor over here where the stream is going. And I like where things are heading. I think the book is something I want to do some sketches of just to kind of figure out the design before I just go in and kind of noodle on it. So we don't want to leave that as is. I might decide if I want to put like chains on it or some kind of lock just to represent that he's sort of like hoarding this knowledge a little bit. hoarding or protecting, or however you want to interpret that. I got to give him some toenails. That's the thing I got to do. Oh, I did say that I was going to look at the vampire today, didn't I? I think this is a good place to leave this for now. And it does feel more balanced now that I've kind of changed his horns. I like his simpler horns better, and they look less like rabbit ears now that they did before. Not when I started this stream, but like previously I had sort of a similar design for the horns, and for whatever reason, it just looked like I was giving him big rabbit ears. And maybe it's because his own ear was less defined. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know what accounts for that per se. But we're going to leave this here for now. I'm going to make sure to save. And we'll switch over to Vampire. Okay, so the idea with this piece is this is going to be Vampiric Tutor. So the tutor in question, this dude, his pupil, being guided to descend into this nasty cave full of like weird stone, but probably not always were stone, vampire heads that are sort of jutting out of the wall, and figuring out how we want to do this. So I spent some time, like, these, I really like how they're feeling at this stage, that they sort of have this like, and I think it would be fun to just kind of go in and just sort of define these guys a little further. Figure out them, and then sort of like use the lighting scheme that I'm applying here to unify the rest of the piece. And again, I did kind of mention that this piece does present some complexities to it. In the sense that there's like, because this light source is sort of coming from the middle, it means that all of these heads are going to be lit slightly differently. I gotta kind of consider how I want to light the dude in the background, because I really like the shape of his hands so far. Our tutor in question, I like the sort of general design of his little like necklace thing, although I think it needs to be, I think I want to go kind of like crazy high fantasy a little bit with it and give him like a golden skull or something that's just like in the middle here. I think that would be fun. Just make it like kind of like, whereas this guy, this demon, is a little more pensive, he's a little more thoughtful. I just want this vampire to be like obviously evil. Like, and I think he already sort of like emits that vibe. You know, he's a hooded figure, he's sort of guiding this guy, this scared looking dude. And I do like how his expression is turning out so far. Like, he's sort of afraid, he's tired, he's perhaps been searching for this for a long time, but I think I do need to make him a little more pale to sort of enhance that. Somewhat more pale, for sure. And then figuring out his clothes and how the clothes should be lit to give the impression that they're sort of part of this scene. I think that's one of the things that's like bothering me so far about just how this is coming together in general. So we want to try and address that a little bit, and like I said, sort of unify the kind of overall structure of this piece. And I think part of the, one issue is the way that I blocked in some of this. It's a little fuzzy. And I think it almost always behooves you to just kind of go in chunky, block things out like big chunks, rather than sort of, well, you know, I'm saying that, but sometimes it's nice to kind of go in a little softer and sort of build things up. But the way I've done it here, I think, is throwing me off because it's a different brush. I can't remember what brush I was using, but you can see the kind of the gaps. You know, it looks like a sponge or something was applied, and that's not really what I need at this stage, I think, to define this piece. Yeah, give this piece a little more definition and understanding of like how the edges are functioning. I don't know that I love this either, but at least it's giving me something to do here, because I am a little bit lost with this piece, I think, at this stage, and I need a little bit more of a think about how I want it ultimately to end up. You know what I mean? And again, very simple color wheel sort of stuff going on here. Orange light, blue tunic. You know, we're not reinventing the wheel by any means. And I think this over here is cutting a little bit too deep into the shadow. But I also don't fully understand, because I haven't really mapped it, like what the structure of this cave is. And maybe it's not necessarily important that I do understand that, and what might be more important is just making sure that this sort of abstract shapes kind of make sense and provide an impression that you know, we're descending into darkness. Right, and so we want the edges of the painting to be darker, and we want the sort of like the warmth to be in this initial stage, this initial like entryway. And I think I've sort of accomplished that so far, at least with like how these guys are lit. This one's the warmest because it's the closest to the light. This one's a little bit less so, and you can see the blues coming in here, and this guy has a lot more purples and kind of dark colors, so because he's the farthest away and the closest to the viewer. But his eyes still have this sort of glow, and I just sort of like thought that would be a fun detail. And I do, so this side I think needs to be deeper into the blue, because it's sort of like on the opposite side of the torch. And I think that'll help kind of give the impression of that he's sort of being coaxed to the dark side by this figure that is on that side of him, kind of behind him. So, I don't want this to be too dark though. That's too blue, I think. It's probably too much blue. And this is not supposed to be like that. I don't have a totally solid idea of what I'm doing here. Just kind of like noodling away on this little like corner up here. That's okay though. I think maybe, yeah, we go in and kind of smudge some of this stuff together and then go back in and redefine it a little bit. All right, actually, let me get some of this. That's still on the smudge tool. All right, this is something. Let's get back over to our figure here. And let me grab a little bit of this orange. At least get this lighting into the edges that are sort of like facing the light. Yeah, I'm already hating that. But maybe that's part of the process. I think this is a thing that I need to actually look up how to do well and do some studies on. What do you do with that light? See, that looks a little more defined, so I don't hate that. It's starting to look like something, but it's far from good. It's something. And for those of you who don't know me personally, like when I'm self-deprecating about my art, it's typically coming from a pretty objective place. Like I have no. I'm not say, oh, that stinks. Like I'm really just kind of like, it's just my own standards for what I think is decent. And sometimes I just say, yeah, that stinks, but it's good enough, and I have to get it done. It stinks to me. You know, it's like, obviously it stinks in comparison to, like, you know, some of the best artists in the world, and some of the worst artists in the world have done better work than this. It's it's really for me, it's like I have to be able to make fun of whatever I'm doing to some extent, because it's never going to be perfect. And when I'm self-deprecating about my work, I also want to be clear, it's like, one thing that I think is important to recognize is that when you put down your own work, especially if you're in a community of artists, it's like you have to be careful about doing that, just because everybody's at a different stage in their journey, you know, and the stuff that you're making might look like crap to you, but it looks awesome to somebody else, and they might feel, you know, it's like you shouldn't put down your own work unless you have like some kind of objective criteria for doing so. It's the same with anybody else's work, but you can put down your own work because it's yours, and you can do as you please with it, and you don't need to solicit criticism from yourself. It's like you should really only be, you should never be putting down someone's work just for the sake of it, of course. What you should be doing is, if they ask for critique, give them constructive critique, and make sure it aligns with their goals for whatever the piece that they're working on is. That's that. I mean, obviously, if I say like, oh, that sucks, that's not constructive critique of my own work. I'm not trying to constructively critique my work in this moment. But what I am trying to say is that when I make fun of my work, it's just because I think it's funny to do so, and it doesn't reflect on me personally as an artist, especially when I'm doing it publicly. Like, obviously at that stage, I feel like, oh, it's fine. If I'm going to put down my own work because I actually legitimately think it stinks, I'll probably just delete it, to be honest, or I just won't keep working on it if I don't feel like it's up to snuff. And this guy, I think overall this piece is, you know, quote unquote, up to snuff. In terms of, I haven't gotten to the point where I hate it so much that I'm going to stop working on it. I don't really hate any of my art, to be fair. I made it, so that means I must have liked something about it when I started making it. And sometimes I forget what that thing is after I look at it again, but usually there's something still there that captures my interest. And this is too much over here, I'm realizing. Let me blast this with the blender. This is where things are getting a little muddy. I love that. I need to fix all of this. do want to give the impression that the torchlight is getting weaker as it gets further into these shadow areas, of course, or gets further away from the light source. That's really what we're going for here. And then I think let's get some blue shadow. Bring it over here. I think one issue I'm running into with these pants is just that they're too, like, one note in their color. Like, overall, like, the base color was too flat. And now it's making it weird when I add color into the shadow and the light regions. So something must be done about that. We worked on this a little bit. I'm starting to get thirsty. I've been talking for a little while. That's okay. I think what we're going to do is call it here for a moment. But let me just check on one thing here. I'm guessing that nobody else has entered the street. Yep. We're still all alone in here, and that's okay. Doing art alone is one of the staples of the artistic practice. More often than not, you'll be doing art alone. Even when you're with friends doing art, there is this sense of solitude, I think, as you're sucked into the world of your picture. That's how it should feel. I think one of the few times it feels like you're doing art like with other people when you're with them is when you're doing like figure drawing or something. When you're doing live figure drawing and you're with other people and you're all painting the same or drawing the same subject, and there's this kind of sense of community. And you're also, it's like you are already in the world that you're drawing because you're drawing this representational thing, and there it is with you. And you're constantly looking back and forth between the picture and the subject. So I think that's one of the few times that you really feel with others while you're making art. And I'm specifically talking about like picture making that is, it's like I wouldn't say that like if you're in a band, you are making art with other people. That's like probably feels much more fundamentally like a community of artists. But in the case of making pictures with something like this, more often than not, you walk that road alone. And some people like that a lot. I happen to be one of those people. I'm A-okay with that. I'm a lone wolf, as they say. And so we are here once again, streaming into the ether. Makes it sound like I'm like peeing off the side of a canyon or something. But at any rate, I had a lot of fun today with making some advancements on these paintings. I'll probably do some more with these and keep on trucking on them. And they will probably advance a little bit before the next time I stream. But if not, then we'll pick up back here next time and maybe even start a new painting. We will see, as I need to get several of these done, as I mentioned before March, and hopefully that will go smoothly. All right, folks, take care. Get some drawing done this weekend. I hope you're not too snowed in if you're in the northern realms of especially the U.S. I know we've got a lot of snow here, but regardless, if you are snowed in, great time to get some artwork done alone. All by your lonesome, lone wolf it. Wolves love the snow because they get to be alone. It's not actually why, but I'm guessing. But at any rate, let's just hop off here before I make more of a